Hey everyone, welcome to day 23, and today we'll be learning about a couple of hooks in React. And let's get started with the session. Okay, all right. So today's session is about hooks in React. So before we get into all of those things, let's find out how we can set up a React project. So in the previous sessions, we were manually adding all of the React scripts. For example, the React library, React DOM library, and Babel, and all of those things. We were manually setting up things, but there is a convenient way of doing that, getting started with a React project. So one of the most popular ways of doing that is using um, a special command line utility, which is create react app. And using that, you can basically set up the project structure for any React application. There are other ways as well. We can also create a React project using Vite, but first we'll look at this one since it is quite popular. So let's get started with that. So in order to use the create react app command, you can type npx. So the prerequisite is that you should have a node version higher than 14, I believe, in order to use this command. So you say npx. It is a command which is available once you have node.js installed on your machine, and then you can say create react app and the name of the app that you want to create. So we'll just say day 23, for example, and we will say uh, use state. Okay. So then it will basically, do the setup using create react app. It will install the packages and take care of all of those things. Okay. All right, looks like there was some hiccup at my end, but yeah, I guess we should be back now. And yeah, it's doing that installation. Let me. Um, so I guess there was a network issue. Let me just rerun the same command again. Okay, so it's doing all of the installation. It has, created all of the packages. Okay, just give me a sec. I need to clean this up. All right. Let's take another look at this. We will say npx create react app day 23. This is the name of the app. All right. And basically, it is downloading packages from the npm repository and installing those packages. And it is setting up things. So, in the meantime, it is doing that. We'll just wait just a bit because it's going to take some time for the installation. Okay. All right. In the meantime, I'll just open VS Code till it is doing all of those things. So far we just have a package.json file, and once the installation is complete, I guess because I'm streaming, it is taking up more time to do all of that. All right. So I'll just share the documentation. I'll just show the documentation, related to this. Create React app. So it is quite popular when you want to build a single page application. The Create React app solution is quite popular over here. The steps are being shown how you can use this command, and you can see that it's using npx. It's a package runner tool which comes with npm, right? And under the hood, create react app uses webpack. So if you remember, a few weeks ago we had learned about webpack, right, which is a module bundler, and it helps us to take care of the manage the dependencies and all of the files of our project, right? So behind the scenes or under the hood, create react app uses webpack. And you can read more about it on their documentation. So all of these resources have been shared with you on the Devsnest website. So a few of you are commenting about voices breaking as difficult to hear. Is that the case with all of you? All right. So you guys can let me know in the comment if you are able to hear me clearly or not. All right, so it's clear. All right, fine. So maybe it's an isolated issue. Anyways, so you guys can see right now that the script which we had, the command which we had executed, it is completed. And if everything is working fine, you should see this as the output. So what we will do is we'll just switch into that directory, cd day 23, and so we are inside this. Let's open VS Code from here. All right, and you can see that it has set up this project structure for us. We can take a look at package.json. We're using React version 18, and there are a few other things available over here. So let's see how we can get started with this. Okay, so in order to get started with this, we need to say npm start. It will once again execute this, it will execute this script, react script start. It's a custom script which internally uses webpack, right? And once it is running, you can see it will show you this message. So let's open this localhost 3000. So if everything has been set up properly at your end, you should see this logo, and this page should be visible to you. All right, okay. So let's take a look at the structure which is available. So we have this index.js file. Let me zoom this a bit for you guys. All right. So in the previous lesson, we had learned that, in the session, we had imported React, right? So here we are importing React from the npm package, right? So you can see that React is installed, ReactDom is installed, and React script is something which is used to, run the or host the application. Okay. And so the index.js file is the entry point. Then we can see that, when we were playing around with the, application the last time, we were using this method, um, create element, right? But starting React 18, We have a different package from where we are getting ReactDom. We're getting it from ReactDom/client, and instead of using the create element method, we make use of the createRoot method. The functionality is somewhat similar. You give it the root element and you call root.render and pass it the the thing which you want to, the element which you want to render. So here we are rendering the app component, right? Okay. And if we go inside this component, okay, it is present inside app.js. So this is nothing but a functional component which we had learned last time. And it is just returning some elements. These are all JSX, right? And this is having a header image, and basically you're seeing all of this which is being rendered from here, right, from this particular component. All right, so this is what we're doing. This is our entry point, then we are just and then this is the main file, index.html. If you take a look over here, we have this div which has the id root. So that is what we are trying to find over here. We are getting that element, okay, and we are saying this is the root element, and then we're calling the render function, and this is the component which we want to render inside this element. All right, and if you inspect this in the browser as well, you should see that we have the root element, and inside that we have the div which has the class app, then we have header, image, paragraph, and this reference tag. So it is quite clear that, you know, whatever is being rendered, it is coming from the app component, and these are the contents of the app component. All right, so I hope this part is clear to you guys. Okay, so the next thing that we will be doing is that we'll be getting rid of all of this code since we don't need this. Okay, and we don't need this file as well. Let's delete this and remove its let's remove. So this is some css, changes, css which was there, the default css, so we don't need this, so we are getting rid of this. All right, so this is app. Let's just save this, and it's saying cannot resolve logo.svg. Okay, users src. This is a test file, we don't need that as well, so let's delete it also. Okay, and we don't need setup tests as well. We'll look at all of these functionality a bit later on. Okay, and let's get rid of this. We don't need this, and we don't need report web vitals as well for now. I'm just cleaning up the code, getting rid of all the things we do not need. All right, this is an app. Okay, let's just do a quick refresh. We might have to restart this. We're getting this from app.js line number. Okay, I think src. Yeah, because we have this reference of logo, right? And we have removed this. All right, so now it's fine. So we can see this text. This is an app. All right. The next thing that we want to do is, so let's understand the term state, because the first hook that we will be looking at is the useState hook. So hooks are basically they provide us some, they are basically a component or a function which, has the ability to modify the state of our application, and they provide some additional functionality which you can use within your component. And it is a hook is a component which you can reuse. It provides a specific functionality, and it allows you to reuse the functionality. And the difference is that it does not return JSX, but it's basically a function, and you give it. It generally accepts an input and provides you some output. We'll take a look at this so that you guys get a better understanding. So the first hook, which is provided by React, which we will be examining right now, is the useState hook. But before we get into that, let's understand the term state. Okay, what does state mean basically? So suppose I have this variable. Okay, let uh, let text equals Devsnest. Okay, and then what I want to do is I just want to display this text over here. And this is the interpolation syntax, if you guys remember from the previous session. And now we see this text, Devsnest. All right, now this is the current state of this variable, that it is holding the value Devsnest. So this is the current state for this variable. So it represents the it tells us something about this variable at a given point of time. Now suppose I have this I have this input element. So input text, for example, and let's just give it some name, content, and id is content. Okay, and then what I want to do is whenever the text inside this, whatever we are typing inside this input box, that should be um, whatever we are typing, that should be assigned to this variable. Okay, so whenever the input is being changed, we want to update the value of this variable text. So for this event, on change event, let's write a handle change. Okay, and it will receive the event object. And what we want to do is we want to say that text equals event dot target dot value, right? So it's the event is happening on the input element, and we will pass this handler over here. We know that we want to execute JavaScript, right? So whatever we want to execute within JavaScript, we provide that value we need to provide within the curly braces. Okay, and so when this event happens, this whatever is the value of the input, it will be assigned to this variable text. Now let's log this in the console. So we are going to say updated value of text, and let's log the value text over here. Let's save this. All right. Okay, let's go to the console and let's type something. For example, stu. So you can see that every time we press a key, whatever is the updated value of this input, it is being logged to the console, right? So this assignment is happening, and we are logging this, right? So you can see that the state of this input box, it modified, it was initially empty, then it became s, then st, then stu. So over a period of time, right, the state of the input element has changed from empty, then having a one character, then two characters, and three characters. So at this given point of time, the state of the input is that it holds the value stu. Now, what we were expect, so I mean, this is what a state represents. It represents the information about a particular thing, and it is telling us that right now the state of the input element is that it is holding the value stu. All right. Now you might be wondering that, we are assigning this, we are updating the content of this variable text, and we're using this value over here. But why is it not modifying it over here? Why is it still showing Devsnest? All right. Because the idea was that whatever you're typing over here in this input box, input element, it should be shown over here as well. All right. So the reason is that the way React works is it uh, in order to show the update, it needs to re-render the component. Okay, it needs to re-render the UI. Now, what does that mean? It means that it will recall this app function. Okay, this functional component, whatever is whatever are the values, it will use this, and whatever we are returning over here, uh, if any modification that is happening to its variables, right, the updated values would be re-rendered over here, and it will basically display the changes that we are making to this variable on the UI, right? So that is what is meant by re-rendering, that it will once again call this component. Whatever modifications have been made, it will update the UI with whatever is returned by this component, right? So this component is returning this JSX, all right, and it is displaying this value of text. But right now, whatever we are typing over here, you can see that it is updating this variable, okay? But in the UI, it's not getting reflected. It's not getting reflected, uh, you know, inside whatever we were passing to this, this value is not being reflected in the UI. So logically, whatever we are doing, that is correct, because you can see that this variable is getting updated, this function is getting called, this log is being printed. So this is happening, but React is not understanding that it needs to re-render the UI. So the reason why this is happening is because changes to local variables. So this is a local variable, right? This is a regular function, and then this is a local variable inside this function. So whatever changes we are making to a local variable, it does not inform React that it needs to update the UI. All right. And the second thing is, even if a re-render happens, right, in that case, all the local variables, changes to local variables, they are lost. Okay, because a component is rendered from scratch. Now, for example, let me add this log statement over here. App component rendered. Okay, so you can see that this log is printed, app component rendered. Okay, because our component was updated, and so every time this component is rendered, you will see this statement, app component rendered. Now, when we are typing something over here, you can see the value is being updated, but the component is not being rendered again. So in order to, trigger a re-render, and also persist the value of you know the modification that we have made. We need a special type of variable which we can create using the useState hook. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So what we will do is we will say that we will import useState, okay, from React. Now this is a special hook which is provided by React itself. It's a built-in hook, okay. And you can either install it, I mean you can either use it like this, or what you can do is, suppose you do not want to use this import statement, what you can do is you can say react dot use state like this. So these are the two ways by which you can make use of this. And you can say const text equals react dot use state. You can do something like this, or you can make use of this syntax and you can get rid of this uh, you know react keyword. All right, and let's get rid of this. Now what this hook is doing is that it will return a value which is basically an array. All right, so for example, let's just call this variable as state, and then this what is returned by it is an array, and you can pass a value to this function which will be the initial value that that state holds. Okay, so for example, the initial value should be Devsnest. Okay, and then this hook gets called. This is the initial value, and let's take a look at what it is doing in the console. Let's log this. Okay, and just for the time being, let me comment this part out. Okay, text is not defined. Yeah, let me comment this out as well. All right, so you can see that this log statement is coming from this line, right? And if we examine that the contents of this array, we are seeing that we're getting two properties. First is the initial value which we pass to this state hook, and the next thing is a function. Okay, what this function allows us to do is that it allows us to modify this variable, the value uh, which is being returned by this hook. All right, so the value is available in the first item of the array, and this updater function is available in the second one. Okay, so you can see that over here, this is the initial value, and then this is the function which is basically present within ReactDom, right? All right, so and what we will do over here is that instead of saying that const text is equal state of 0, something like this, and now let me uncomment this code. Okay, so you can see let me do a refresh. Text is state and index, not like this. Yeah, so you can see that we are saying that text is whatever was returned by this hook, the initial value, and then let's take the updater function, update text, for example, in a variable, and let's say state at index 1. And what we will do is, what we wanted to achieve is that as soon as we're typing something, it should reflect that change over here, right? So now what we will do is, instead of directly assigning the value, we will say that we want to modify the value of this variable, right? So the way we can do that is that we will make use of the updater function, which is provided by this hook, right? And we will call that function. So we'll say update text, and uh, the value that we want to assign to this variable, we will pass that. So we want to say event.target.value over here. All right. And let's save this. And now let's take a look at the logs. So I'm pressing S now. So you can see that the moment I typed something over here, the change was reflected over here as well. And you can see it is saying updated value of text, and we can see that app component re-rendered, right? So what this hook is doing is that it is you know it is maintaining the state of that variable between re-renders, and when we call this update function, right, this is triggering a re-render. It is informing React that the value of the state has been modified, it, and you need to re-render the UI, okay, in order to show the latest changes. So since everything is being re-rendered, this component is being called again, and it is being rendered from scratch. Now what happens is, when this component is rendered for the first time, right, it sees that this useState hook is available. This is the initial value, and that is what is assigned to this variable, right? Now when a re-render happens, okay, this function is called once again. Then uh, whatever is the initial value, that is ignored, okay. When a re-render happens, the initial value that is passed to the useState hook, it is ignored. Instead, it returns you the updated value which you had set over here. All right. So then it will assign that value to this variable. Then we are saying that text is equal to state at index 0. Then updated text is that updater function. And then as we are typing, this function gets called, the update text function gets called, and the same thing happens again. A re-render will happen once again. All right. Now let's make a slight modification. Instead of saying writing it like this, we can make use of destructuring, and we can follow this convention that we can, since uh, this is an array, so the first value is the value associated with the state, so that we are assigning to the text variable. And we will say set text. Okay, this is responsible for updating the value for this variable, right? So that is the next statement, and we can get rid of these two statements, right? And here we can say set text. All right. And we have basically compressed those three lines into a single line using destructuring. And this is generally the convention which is followed, that this is the variable that you want to associate the state with, and this is uh, the updater, the setter function, which is responsible for modifying the value of this variable. All right. So generally we use this convention set. Okay. So this, for example, this is text and then set text. Suppose I call this, set data. For example, if I call this variable as data, then I will have over here set data. So that is just a naming convention which is followed. You can name name this function anything that you want, right? So the same behavior is happening. You can see that the value of text is updated, then it is calling, you can see this log statement being printed. So the app function is re-rendered. Just to make sure, you can go to the app.js file, and we can add a breakpoint over here. So let me just remove this letter T, and you can see that this function is called once again. Now, since this is a re-render, you can see that initially both of these are undefined. Let me just move ahead, and now you can see that text is equal to the updated value, and then we have the setText setter function, and then we are seeing this statement, whatever is returned by the component, right? React will use this to update the real DOM, right? And it will use the updated value of this text variable. Okay, and right now each component is being called twice. That is a feature or a functionality of React 18 to ensure that uh, we are making use of pure, that our component is pure and it is built using a pure function. We'll understand what a pure function is a bit later on, but right now it is purposely calling each of your components twice. Okay, that is why we are seeing these statements twice: app component rendered, then app component rendered. Uh, it is happening because of uh, uh, this strict mode which is there in React, right? You see this react.strict mode. Because of this, it when we are in the development mode, right, it will re-render all of your components twice. Okay, it will call the component function twice. Suppose I comment this statement out. Okay, if I comment this line, so it's no longer in strict mode, and now you will see that it is only printing this statement once. Okay, so you can see that updated value of text, and then once again app component re-rendered. All right, so I think I'll keep it like this for now till we are learning. So we have learned two things so far. The useState hook provides us a state variable. This hook returns two values, right? The first is the state variable, right? This is the state variable which retain its value during re-renders. We saw that when we were using a local variable. So for example, let's use a local variable. Let local variable equals ABC, for example. And then over here, what we will do is we will say local variable equals event dot target dot value. Okay, same thing we're doing over here, and and the same thing that we're doing over here, we're doing that to the local variable as well. And let's log that in the console as well. Console.log local variable. All right, so this is after it was updated, and this is the initial value. Okay, so we'll just say initial value of local variable. All right, let's save this, and I'll just get rid of this breakpoint for the time being. We'll just check the logs. So you can see initial value of local variable, it's ABC, and then app component rendered. Let me press ST, for example. So you can see that uh, local variable has been modified to S, then the updated, the value of text was updated, right? And then which basically caused a re-render. And then you can once again see that once a re-render happened, the the local variable, its value was lost, whereas the you know the state variable, it retained its value between re-render, right? So that is the first thing that we learned. The second thing that we learned is that whenever we want to modify the state variable, we make use of this setter function, and it does two things. Number one, it triggers a re-render, right? And number two, it updates the state variable. All right. So these are the two things which this setter function is responsible for. All right. So I hope this is clear to you guys. Why do we need a state variable? What is how does React handle updates? So it handles updates by recreating that component, re-rendering that component, and so that we do not lose the state of that component between re-renders. We make use of this special hook known as useState, which maintains the state of that component. It helps the component remember that this was where you had left off before you were re-rendered. All right. So if you guys have any doubts related to this, you can ask me in the comments. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next topic. All right, so I'm assuming that there are no all right, so there's a question as to what is the difference between rendered and re-rendered. So basically, if you take a look at this component, right? This is a functional component. This is returning this JSX, all right, which React uses. If you remember the last session, right? Internally, React uses the react.create element, and we create an element, and then we tell where we want to append that element, right? So that all those things which we had learned last time, and we use JSX for convenience. So basically, this is a React object which is being returned by this component. And then what React does is that whatever is returned by this, it it uses this, and it uses this to uh, modify or create the DOM, right? If you do not know what DOM is, you will have to revisit day 3 or day 4, okay, of this boot camp, because I have already covered what is DOM over there, and I do not want to repeat that right now. All right, but at a high level, this is the DOM tree, right? All of the elements, the document object model. So based on whatever is returned by a component, uh, it creates the DOM tree. React, modifies the actual DOM tree, and you can see that this component was returning a div, an input element, and this text, right? So you can see the same thing over here, right? This is a React object which is used by React, and then it sees modifications in this object, and whatever changes and based on this object, it creates the actual DOM which the browser understands. All right, so this is what is known as a virtual DOM, that React has its own representation of the DOM, and whenever there are changes happening, for example, we modified the value of text, right? So what React will do is it will once again call this component, and whatever is returned by this component, now it will use the latest value. Then what it will do is it will compare what was the previous value of this object and what is the new value. Whatever are the changes, it will sync that to the real DOM over here. So for example, if I type u over here, right, you can see that only this value was modified. So you can see this blinking happening over here, right? So this is the only place where the change was happening. Okay. So what we mean by render is that whatever is returned by this component, that is displayed on the UI or on this, inside the browser or the screen. So that is rendering, you know, basically displaying whatever is returned by that, component. And re-rendering means that whenever we are making any changes to any variable, any state variable within that component, it will recreate, you know or it will update the UI. So that is what is meant by re-rendering. So re-rendering means that you are showing something on the UI. Re-rendering means that you are updating the UI. All right. All right. So uh, so I hope that is clear to you. Okay. And that is what we meant by re-rendering. Okay, so let's move on to the next example. So there are a couple of ways. There are a few other uh, scenarios associated with the useState hook. So let's do one thing. Let's create another component. Let's call that as Counter.js. You can either use the JS extension or you can use JSX. Both of them work. So I'll just use JS for now. And you can install this extension, React ES7, uh, this one, ES7 React Redux React Native Snippets. Okay, I already have this extension installed. You can install this as well. So now what you can do is you can type something like this, RFC for React Functional Component, and you can say RFCE React Functional Component Export, for example, right? And let's just call this as the counter component. Okay, and let's say counter. So it basically automatically creates this structure for you of a component, and basically some default setup is already done for you, so you can make use of this extension. And there are different shortcuts provided by this extension. We looked at RFC, and you just hit the tab key and it you know generates this kind of a component for you looking at the name of the file. Okay, so here what we will do is suppose what we want to do is we want to create a component which keeps a track of the number of times a button is clicked. All right, so let's do that. So this is returning a div, and let's have a button over here, and we will say count colon, and let's use a state variable over here. So we'll say use state, and you can make use of this use state snippet, which is also provided by this extension. So you will say count, set count, and the initial value is 0. All right, so you can pass any type of value to this use state hook. It can be a string, it can be a number, it can be an array, it can be an object. So you can have any kind of value over here. All right, so initially we are setting it to 0, and we'll just use the value of the count over here. And what we want to do is when we are clicking on this, we want to update the count value. So we will say const handle click, and what we will do is we will just say set count count, whatever was the previous value of count, we will just add 1 to it, and that is what we are going to do. And then we will say handle click. All right. Okay. Now, in order to use this component, what we will do is, earlier we were making use of the app component, right? We'll still make use of that, but instead of the app component returning this, we will say that it returns the counter now. Okay, so we will say counter, counter, and the counter we are importing from this file, and let's just save this for now. And we forgot to import, you can see this error, right? useState is not defined, so we forgot to import this useState hook from React. Now it is imported and the error is gone. Okay, and let's click on this. So as we are clicking on this, it is updating the value of count. This component is re-rendered, and whatever is the latest value of count, that is being shown inside this button. Okay, all right. So now suppose what you want to do is we have this component, right? So every time we click on this, what we want is that its value is updated by 4. Okay, so what we will do over here is, suppose I write something like this. We are saying set count plus 1, count plus 1, count plus 1. We are calling this 4 times. So what we expect is, when we click on this button, it should set the value of count to 4. Okay, so let's click on this. All right, so I clicked on this, but the value is still 1. Why is that? We are calling this function 4 times, but its value is still 1. Okay, let me try clicking on this again. Even now it has increased its value by just 1. What we were expecting, that right now it should have been 8, right? The first time it should have been 4, then 4 more should have been added to it. Right now we were expecting that it would be 8, but still it has just incremented this value by 1. Why is it behaving like this? Any ideas? You can let me know in the comment. So all right, so yeah, so you're correct, Chetan, you're around the right track, but let's dig a bit, let's dig deep into this. So the way React works is that each state is associated with a particular, I mean, each render, okay, of the component is associated with a particular state. All right, and it will keep, it will not modify the and that state, it will remain locked for that render. All right, if you modify the state, the component will be rendered again. Okay, and the value for and the state associated with that render, it will remain same throughout the life cycle of that render, right? So right now what is happening is, we are saying that set count to count plus 1. So right now what we are saying basically over here is, the initial value of count is 0, and we are saying 0 plus 1, okay, which is nothing but 1, right? And over here, since I said that the state remains the same for the life cycle of the render, so in the current render, the value of count will always be 0. Okay, so basically we are just doing the same thing again and again. We are saying 0 plus 1, and it is giving us, you know, the result as 1. It's the same thing happening again and again. We're just doing 0 plus 1, and it is giving the output as 1. All right, so the same thing is being repeated again and again. That is why we are seeing over here that the value is only incrementing by 1. Then the second thing is that, okay, you might be wondering that, we call this statement, and in the previous example what we had seen is that the you know the moment this function is called, it will trigger a re-render, right? But there's a twist in that story as well. So what happens is that uh, React makes some optimizations. So it does not execute, it does not immediately trigger a re-render when it, comes across this line. Since this is happening after inside an event handler. So what React will do is it will, you know, uh, move all of these statements in a queue. Okay, it will batch all of these statements together. All right. It will not trigger a re-render or modify the state unless and until we have, this function, this event handler has finished executing. All right. Uh, until we are out of this function, none of these changes will happen. All right, React will add all of these changes to a queue. Okay, so this is the first statement, this is the next statement, and it will batch all of these statements together. Once this function has finished executing, that is when it will go through that queue. All right, so then it sees that, okay, the previous value for count was 0, so it's doing 0 plus 1 1. Then it sees, okay, so the state has been modified. Then it sees the next statement in the queue, it will execute that, right? So it's the same thing which is happening. Count is 0, and 0 plus 1 1, 0 plus 1 1, 0 plus 1 1, right? So it is basically doing all of this, and that is why we are just getting a single, value, right? Single increment basically. So this is how React works in general. When there first of all, it will not immediately trigger a re-render whenever we are inside an event handler and all the code inside an event handler has finished executing. It will not trigger a re-render, and the updates made to the state are only reflected in the next render, right? So so for this, current state, the value of count was 0. But what if you want to, make use of the updated value of the state before the, next re-render? How do we handle that scenario? All right, so for that, there is a special syntax of writing the setter function. So I'll just comment this out for now. So that is known as the updater function. Okay, so the way that works is that over here we pass a callback function, and that callback function is called with a special value. So this holds the previous state. Okay, and suppose we call this as previous count. All right, and then what we want to do is we want to modify the state before the, access the modified value before the next re-render, right? So we will say previous count plus 1. All right, so right now it is 0 plus 1 1. Okay, now here also I will just write the same thing. This is known as the updater function syntax, and I'll just, do the same thing for this lines as well. Now the value of the state becomes 1. Now when this function is called again, right, this time its value will be 1. This callback will be called with the modified value of the state, which is 1. Now it will do 1 plus 1, which is 2. Then the function gets called again. Now the previous value is 2. So it will do 2 plus 1, which is 3. And then similarly, now this is 3 and it will do 3 plus 1, which is 4. Now we have understood this in theory. Let's see if it is actually working. Let me do a refresh. And now let me click on this. And now you can see that it is showing us the value of count as 4. Let me click on it again. Now it is 8. And now it is 12. So now we're getting the desired behavior. Okay. And the way this is working is that, we learned that React batches all of these statements together. It adds them to the queue. When we use this syntax, when the next function in the queue gets called, right, it is called with the output of the previous function. Okay. So the previous state value was 1. So when this gets called, this becomes 1. Then 1 plus 1 is 2. The output of this is passed along to this one. So all the updater functions which were added to the queue, they receive the latest values, and then finally the re-render happens. This component, actually let me add a log statement over here as well. Counter rendered. Okay, and we log the value of count as well. And let's log the value of after click, and let's log the value of count over here as well. Okay, let's do a refresh, and you can see countered rendered, the initial value is 0. And let me click on this. So you can see even after click, right, the value of count is 0. This is because this each render is associated with a state, and that state remains locked, right? So by till the time we had clicked, we were in that first render, and the state was 0. All right, it is only after the re-rendered happened, then you're seeing that the updated value of counter, you're receiving that. So behind the scenes, right, in between the renders, React is going through the statements which it queued, or the statements which it batched. Okay, this process is known as batching. And then it went through all of the functions, and since we use the updater function syntax, right, it calculated the next state based on the previous state. All right, so in scenarios where you need access to the previous state in between re-renders, you can make use of the updater function syntax. All right, and that is how when the next re-render happens, right, we're getting the value as 4. And you can see that this is a performance optimization. Instead of having 4 different, these are 4 statements, right, instead of having 4 different re-renders, we are just having one re-rendered. All right, so initially it was 0. When I clicked on it again, you can only see one statement over here, right, counter re-rendered. This is the first one, and then this is the next one. This each set count statement is not triggering a new re-render. Instead, we are going through all of the updates, and then we have a single re-render. So this is a performance optimization done by React, that it batches multiple, set statements together, and you get a single re-render. Okay, so I hope this is clear to you guys, um, why the behavior is like this, and why it was not working earlier and why it is working now. So there's a question in the chat, if we change the last one to 3, right? So it will come over here, it will do 2 plus 1 3, and then 3 plus 3 you should get the output as 6. Let me save this and let's try this out. Let's do a refresh. So you're getting the output as 6 now, right? So whatever was the previous state, it is adding 3 to that. So till here it was 3, and then it will do 3 plus 3, and you will get the output as 6. So I hope this is clear to you guys. Yeah, in the commented one, yeah, you can easily solve it, solve that issue. uh so for example, you do plus 3, right? You will still get the output as so the last one, right? So it will do 0 plus 3 3. I think we should get the output as 3. Let's see. So you can see over here we're getting the output as 3, right? Because over here it was always 0 plus 1 0 plus 1 0 plus 1, and then the last one was 0 plus 3, correct? So when you do not use the updater function syntax, right, you are completely disregarding all of the previous state changes. Whatever was the last one, that is the one which is being used. Okay, so it was a nice question. I hope the difference between these two syntax, it has become clear to you. All right. Okay. Now the next functionality which is associated with this is the another thing that we will be looking at is the initializer function syntax. So this was the updater function syntax. Now suppose what we have is a we have a list, okay, .js, fce, and let's just call it as list. All right, and what we will do over here is that let's create a function const get items, and what this function will do is um, let's write a log over here, console.log %c. You can use that to change the color of the logs. Get items called, and then let's use a color over here, for example royal blue. Okay, and return array.fill. Sorry, we initialize an array with size 50, and then we call the fill function, and we fill all of these 50 items with the value 0. And then what we will do is we will create a UL, and we will go through um, all the items. So let's store all of these in a state variable, const use state items, set items, and the value of set items, I mean the value of items we'll get from this function. We'll call that function over here. All right, and what we will do is we will loop through all the items using the map function. Since we are executing JavaScript over here, we'll write this within curly brackets. We'll get a particular item. Okay, and we are interested in the index actually. And what we want to do is we want to return li, and the value of the li is basically index plus 1. Okay, and let's add a button over here. Add item on click. So we'll just use an inline function over here, and we will say set items. And what we will do is we will spread through the value of items, and we will just add another 0 over here. All right, let's save this, and we will use this list component inside app as well. So let me comment out the counter, and instead we will use the list component here. useState is not defined. Once again, we forgot to import this. All right. So you can see that we have 50 LIs over here, right? I'll just do one thing. I'll just import. Where is it? Dot slash index.css. And let's give this a class card. We will say display flex, align items center, and then justify content center, and let's just give this width of 100, view width, and let's give this class to this div. Okay, so we'll say class name card like this, and let's add another class over here. Items, display flex, flex direction, column. Hang on a sec. Items. Actually, we don't need this one. This is fine. Let's make the modification here only. Flex direction, column. All right. So you can see these are the items, and then when I click on add item, right, you can see it is adding a new item to this array, and the count changed. Now we have 51 elements. Now let me add a few more. All right, so every time I click on add item, it is adding a new item. Okay, so another thing is that whenever we are looping, creating a list or looping through elements, we should have a key property. And right now we'll just say that what is unique about each list item is its index, right? So we'll just pass that as the key right now. We'll take a look at what this key property is in one of the upcoming lessons, and what is its significance. We'll take a look at that as well. Right now, to get rid of this warning, I've just added that. All right, so we have 50 items, right? And you can see that get items called, we have this statement printed over here, right? And we are passing this function to uh, to get the initial state of the item. So initially it is 50, right? Now, if you remember that whatever is the initial value, that is only used during the first render, right? Whatever we pass to the useState function, that is only used in the first render. In the consecutive renders, whatever was the updated value of the state, this value is ignored. This function will be ignored. And whatever updates were made to the state variable, instead that is assigned to this items, right? So let me click on this. So you can see that when the re-render happens, we are getting another get items called. Let me click on this again. You can see that, it is, you know, calling that multiple times. So this has been called 4 times. But consider this scenario. Suppose you have an expensive, calculation over here. Even though the state value, whatever is the initial variable that we are passing to this, use state hook, it gets ignored in the next renders. But we can see over here that even in the next renders, uh, it is not resetting it back to 50. It is getting the value from the state, but this function is getting called every time. And the reason why it is happening is because we have written the code like this. Now it is fine right now, because this isn't a very expensive calculation. But suppose you have very complex calculations which take some time to calculate the values, right? So in that scenario there might be a performance hit. So you should always ensure that whenever you are using a function to get the initial value, right? Whenever you're using a function to pass to obtain the initial state, ensure that you make use of the initializer function syntax. Okay. So the way the initializer function syntax works is that you pass the function reference instead, and React will call this function for you. Okay. Instead of you calling it over here. So earlier it was like this, right? Now we have modified it to this. We are just giving the reference of this function now. And let's take a look at the difference that this makes. Let me refresh. Now I'm clicking on add item. You can see that only the first time when this component was rendered, this log was printed. Now I'm clicking on uh, add item every time. This statement is not being logged. Whereas when we had it like this, right? Every time we were doing a click, you can see that get items called, get items called, right? So just ensure that whenever you are, you know, getting the initial value of the state using a function, you give its reference over here. Or the other thing that you can do is you can pass an anonymous function over here, which internally calls this function. All right. And now, even now, if you do add item, you can see that the logs is not being printed. So for the re-renders, it is not recalling this function again. Okay. Earlier also it was recalling the function, but it was ignoring the value returned by that function. So for no reason that function was being called again and again. So either you can do something like this, or you can just pass a reference to this function. Now this way of getting the value by passing either the function reference or using an anonymous function which is calling it. This is known as the initializer function syntax. This is another performance optimization that you can do. All right. So I hope the difference between this and this is clear. This is the uh, incorrect way of doing it, right? And this is the correct way of doing it. This and this is allowed. All right. Okay. So it does not understand what this is. Anyways, because we right now this statement is not commented, so that's why it did not work. So these are some of the ways of using the use state hook. I hope it is clear to you guys. Let's take a short break over here and then we'll move on to the next hook. Okay. If you have any doubts, you can ask me in the comments. So I'll answer the question about the VS Code part first, and then we'll move on to the other question if we have multiple setters of different states, right? So you can use VS Code for React. You don't need a separate IDE, so this is VS Code, right? This is the code editor that we'll be using throughout the front end part of the bootcamp. Okay, and for the other part of the question, let's take a look. So we'll go back to the counter example and let's create another state variable over here. Text, set text, use state. Uh, for example, initial. Okay, and here what we will do is we will just say set text. We'll print the text over here. And we will say initial, sorry, text plus count. Okay, something like this, for example. Or rather, let's use the template literal syntax. And let's go inside index, not index, sorry, app. Let me uncomment this and comment the list example. Okay, you can see the logs over here. App component rendered, counter rendered, and count is 0 and initial is there. Now let me click on count and you can see whatever was the value of state at that point of time, right? So at this point of time the value of count was 0, right? That is what it is showing over here. Next time when we click on this, you will see 0 4. All right. So you can see that it is still you can see this is the first, and this is the initial render, then this is the re-render, and then this is the re-render afterwards, right? So batching just means that it does not each update statement does not trigger an immediate re-render. What it means is that it will hold off the re-rendering until all of the code you know inside this event handler has been executed. Then it will execute all of these statements one by one. Whatever is the final value of the state afterwards, after all of these statements have been executed, it will pass that to this it will make that available to this component when it is called again in the next re-render. Then over here, instead of getting the value as 0, we will be getting the value as 4 or 8 or 12, whatever was the latest value for that state. And the same thing will happen for this as well. Whatever was its state, that value will be assigned to this variable text. Then it will come over here. It sees that the value of count is now 4, for example. So it will display the value as 4 over here. And this was initial text space 0, right? So it will display that value over here, right? So that is what is meant by batching, that it will not immediately, trigger a re-render on every, set statement. Instead, it will wait. Once all of the code inside the event handler has been executed, then it will go through the queue or the statements which have been bashed, and then whatever is the final output, that it will use in the next render. Okay, so I hope your doubt is clear. Now let's take a look at another hook which is pretty useful. So what we will do is let's create another component over here. useEffect.js, useEffect example.js, for example, rfce. Let's call this as use effect example. All right, and so we have another hook available which is from React as well. It's called use effect. Now we use this hook whenever we want our component to be notified of changes which are external to the application, right? So if we take a look at this counter example, this event, we are handling this event right within our application. But suppose there was a there's an event which we cannot handle from within our component. All right, for example, some event which is happening on the window, for example, the movement of the mouse, that is something which we cannot handle directly within our component. It is external to our component. So whenever we want that our application is, or our component is able to respond to such external events, you know and modify, whenever we want to react to an external event, right, which is happening outside the scope of React, we can make use of the use effect hook. Let's take a look at how. I mean, there are different use cases where we can make use of this hook, but let's take a look at a few examples. So for example, what we want to do is we want to say we want to track the movements of the mouse cursor, for example. So let's store that inside a state variable, for example, pointer, or rather cursor position. Okay, and the initial value for that is x is 0 and the y is 0 as well. Okay, and what we will do is we will display the value of x and y over here. So this is what we're going to do. We are going to say current position, sorry, cursor position dot x and cursor position dot y. Okay, let's go inside our app.js. Let's comment this out and let's add the use effect example over here. And since we are making use of the useState hook as well, useState hook, um, okay, so you can see that initially x is 0 and y is 0. Let me print x and y as well, comma y, value of y. So x is 0 and y is 0. Now what I want to do is I want to do something like this: window dot add event listener. Uh, we want to listen to the pointer move event. When that happens, right, what we want to do is we want to we want to call the setCursorPosition function, and we want to say that x is, so this callback function will get the event object, and we will say e dot target dot client x, right, to get the x position, and to get the y position, y coordinate value of the mouse, you'll say e dot target dot client y. Okay, all right, so let's save this, and you can see that, let me do one thing, let me add some log statements over here. Console.log, um, pointer move event. Okay, so you can see that the pointer move event, let's do a refresh. You can see that x is 0 and y is 0, and the pointer move event is happening. Now this is happening, but it's not updating it over here, right? You can see all of these log statements, but nothing is happening, and the values of x and y have become empty. Okay, uh, since this is an external thing which is happening, right, React is not able to understand what is going on. Even though we are calling the correct set state function and everything, it's not working correctly. Okay, let's do a refresh, and you can see the log statement is happening, but nothing is happening. The updates are not happening on the UI. So whenever something which is happening outside the control of the React application, so this is an event which is outside our application, right, outside the scope of React, to make React understand that you know uh, we need to be able to respond to such an event, we can make use of the use effect hook. So what we will do now is we will say that we'll make use of the use effect hook. So this use effect hook, it accepts two things. It accepts a setup function, all right, and so we passed a function over here, right? This is an anonymous function, and it accepts a array of dependencies. We'll take a look at what this is. Right now I'm just passing an empty array, all right, and what I will do is I will move this code inside this use effect hook, all right, and let's save this, and let me clear this. Let's do a refresh. Hang on a sec. E dot target. Am I making a did I make a mistake over here? E dot target. Okay, wait, I do not need target over here actually. All right, so now it is working. Let me just to be sure, let me comment this out once again. Okay, and you can see that, yeah, it is still modifying that. It is modifying the cursor position, and it is also logging that. But the thing is that every time, uh, let me also add another log statement over here, console.log rerender. Okay, so you can see that every time we are moving, it is, doing all of these re-renders keep on happening, and this event is uh, occurring as well. So what it is allowing, so what we will do now is we will move this inside the use effect hook. Okay, and let's take a look at the difference now. So this is happening, it is logging all of the values, right? Whenever I'm moving the mouse, it is updating the x and y coordinates based on where the position of the mouse is. uh, but the thing is that if we take a look at this, okay, let me add a log statement here. All right, so set up of add event listener, or rather add event listener added for pointer move. Okay, and let me just clear this. Let's do a refresh, and you can see that we have this let me just call this as render. Let me do another refresh. So we can see that we have this render which is coming from use effect example. Then we have add event listener added for pointer move. Okay, and now let's move the mouse around a bit. So you can see all of these log statements have been printed: pointer, move, event, then the re-render happened, and it is doing all of that. It is updating it, but the difference is that, whatever this function, right, this was added only once. Okay, this use effect, whatever we added, since this dependency array is empty, this was only called once. All right, that is when the component was rendered for the first time. So you only see this log statement once, whereas if we, remove this outside of the use effect hook, this event handler would be added multiple times. So you will have a lot more log statements, because this event is getting executed multiple times. It is getting fired multiple times, since multiple instances of add event listener have been added. So in such scenarios, in order to control the behavior of external events, and in order to respond to them you know in a controlled manner, we make use of the use effect hook. All right. And like I said, it accepts a setup function, so we are listening to this event. And then these are the dependency arrays. So right now it is empty. That means that this whatever code we have written inside this use effect hook, it only gets executed once. And then there is another thing known as the cleanup function. So what will happen is that whatever we return over here, all right, uh, whatever this function use effect function returns, that code will be executed when this component is removed. All right. um, we'll take a look at what it means by when a component is removed or when a component is unmounted. We'll understand all of that as well, but right now just keep in mind that whenever this component is removed, right, by React, or whenever it is cleared, this cleanup function will be called. Okay. So what we want to do is, when we are moving outside of this component, when this no component is no longer needed, we no longer need to listen to this pointer move event, right? So we'll say window dot remove event listener pointer move, sorry, pointer move, right? And let's make another small change. Let's add this function over here, const handle move equals this, and we'll pass the handle move here, and you'll say handle move. So we will stop listening to this mouse event. Okay. All right. So this is the cleanup function. Okay. So whenever this component will be removed by React, this piece of code will be executed. So whatever things we had set up, over here in the setup part, we want to, clean the setup. So this is the cleanup, this is whatever is returned by this. Uh, this gets executed whenever this component is unmounted. Now, what it means by unmounting, we'll understand a bit later on. But for right now, just for your knowledge, just keep this thing in mind. So this is one example of where we can make use of use effect. Now let's take a look at another example of the use effect. I have with me an API fake from this website, fakestoreapi.com. So what we will do is, basically uh, this website provides us with a free API, which gives us information about certain products, for example. So we have this API called get all categories, and we will call this API, and it will give us all of the different categories which are there. And what we want to do is, for each category we want to get the products in that category, right? So let's take a look at how we can make use of use effect, and how use effect is useful to us. Now this API is external to our system, right? And what we want is that whenever we are selecting a particular category, we should get products from that selected category. Okay. So how do we inform React that, we are changing the category and we need to get the products from that category, right? So let's take a look at how use effect is helpful to us over there. So let me create another example. Let me create a component called Products.js. Okay. So here what we want to do is we want to get all the categories, right? So let me just copy this code. Okay. And put this inside a function, get all categories. All right. And let's store all the categories inside a variable. Okay. So we will say const, let's make use of a state, use state snippet, categories, set categories, and the initial value for the categories is empty. And then here what we want to do is we will log this in the console, as well as we will say set categories, and we will just whatever is the value of JSON that we will assign to the categories. All right. And then what we want to do over here is we'll create a drop down. So we'll create a select tag, categories. Okay. And we will say we have the options over here. So we'll create the options using the categories that we are fetching from here, right? So, and the result of the categories is stored in this variable. So we'll loop through all the categories dot map category, and then this will return an option. Okay. So the key we will assign as the category itself, and the value will be also the category that we're getting, and we'll just display the category over here as well. Dot to uppercase. All right. Okay. And since this is external to our system, actually we don't need it for this purpose. We will just call this over here, get all categories. Let's save this. Once it calls this function, we will get the response. It will be logged over here, and we will set this inside the categories, which should trigger a re-render. And then whatever is the updated value of the categories, it should use that to show the populate the drop down. All right, let's add this over here inside app. Let's comment this, and let's use the products component. And as usual, I have forgotten to import the useState hook. Okay, so you can see that, and you can also see that we're still getting this mouse move event, right? Okay, that was because and another thing is you can see that continuously it is logging this statement. You can see that it is continuously logging the statement over here multiple times. And let me clear this, and you can still see that it is logging this, right? So why this is happening is because every time uh, this API gets called, it triggers a re-render. Then once again, this component is created from scratch. It executes the statement again, and we are basically going in a infinite loop. Now to handle this, right, since this is an external URL, we'll make use of the useEffect hook. All right, and what we will do is we will call get all categories from here. Now suppose I do not specify any dependencies over here. Okay, so let's take a look what happens. It is still behaving in the same way, right? So with every re-render, this use effect, whatever is present inside this use effect, it gets called. Now suppose I provide an empty dependency array, which means that uh, there is no value on which this hook is dependent, and it will not be re-rendered in any scenario. All right, so it will only be called for the first render, otherwise it will not be called. Okay, so let me just do one thing. I will just add a log statement over here. Products rend products component called. Okay, let me get rid of this empty dependency array, and you can see that we are getting this products component called, and whatever is the updated value that is being logged, right? Now suppose I add this dependency array now, which is empty. Let's do a refresh, and you can see that this API call only happened once, right? And products component call was also it's only getting called whenever the app is being rendered, or so it was only re-rendered once when we updated the this is the initial render, and then when we got the categories from the API, and when we set the updated the state, this triggered a re-render, and then basically the products component was called again, and this statement was logged. But then since we have set an empty dependency, right, this function was only called once, whereas earlier it was being called continuously, right? We were going inside a loop. So this is another scenario where the use effect hook is very useful. We are trying to connect to an external system, right? We're getting this data which is outside of the React application. Once we have the data available, we are telling React, now you need to modify the UI based on whatever changes happened. Okay. Now we have all the categories available over here. Electronics. Wait. Electronics, jewelry, men's clothing, and women's clothing. Now, what we want to do is based on uh, the category that we are selecting, we want to show that product's name and image, for example. So, what we are going to do is we will call this API now, and we will pass the selected category. Okay, let me just copy this, and let's create a function get product by category, and I'm just pasting this code over here. And what we want to do is const products comma set products equals useState, and initially it's an empty array as well. Okay, and what we will do is, once we have all the products available, and we also need to get the selected category, right? So we will say on change function handle change. We will get the event object, and we will say we need to store that in a state variable as well, because we need the value across re-renders, right? So use state snippet selected category, and the initial value we will say it is null. All right, and here we will say set selected category. We'll say e dot target dot value, right? So whatever category that we are going to select, it will be you will store that inside this state variable. And let me call this, pass the reference of this function over here, handle change. And yeah, once that happens, right, we need to call this function, correct? So what we will do is we will write another use effect over here, use effect. We will pass the setup function over here, and we will provide the dependencies. Now this time what we want to do is we want to call the get product by category, right? And this will accept the category, or rather what we can do is, instead of this, we can make use of the state variable selected category over here. Now we know that this function is dependent on the selected category, so we will pass, this function should get called whenever the selected category is modified. So we will pass the selected category variable over here, okay? And we will check that if selected category has a value, only then we call this function, okay? Let's save this, and let me add a log statement over here. Log use effect for use effect dependent. Use effect will be called when the category is modified, okay? And we'll just log the value of selected category as well. All right. Let's take a look. Let's do a refresh. And you can see that app is rendered, product component is called, right, which is this log statement. Then this use effect is called, okay? So this use effect gets called, and this one is getting called as well, and we can see that it is printed with the value null, right? Now since the value was null, this function did not get called, so it is being called once, okay, in the first render as well. Now what we will do is we will change the category which we have selected, okay? We will change it to, hang on a sec, why is this not opening? Let me just do a refresh. All right, So let's change this to jewelry, and you can see that this triggered a re-render, and then the use effect was called uh, because the category is modified, and the modified category has been set to jewelry. Okay, so this you can see that let me add a log statement over here as well, console.log without dependency. Let's do a refresh, and you can see that without the use effect without dependency it was called, then the use effect with the dependency it was called in the first render, and we have all of the categories available, and once the categories were set then the product is re-rendered. Now in this case, neither the use effect without the dependency nor this one was, these two log statements were not printed, right? Even though the component was re-rendered. Now this is because the one without the dependency, it is only called once, and in this case, right, get all categories, uh, we are modifying all of the categories, right? We are modifying this state variable. Okay, now since this state variable, I mean this effect is not dependent on this categories variable, right? This use effect, the code inside it did not get called. All right, so that is why you do not see any log statement over here, even though this component was re-rendered. Now let me modify this, and let me click on jewelry, and now you see that we have another re-render, but this time we have this use effect, this log statement being printed, which indicates that uh, you know since this category was modified, this code was executed. Now selected category was there, get product by category, and here what we will do is log this to the console products fetched products, or rather this is yeah, let's rename this to products and products, and over here we will say set products. Let's pass this variable products. Okay, and you can see we are getting 4 products which are available in the jewelry category. All right, so we are interested in the title and the image. All right, so let's render this over here, and what we will do is we'll create a section, and within this section we will display the selected category. Okay, and then we have another section over here which we will basically, what we will do is we will say products dot map. We'll get a particular product, and this will return a section. All right, and what we will do is we will say that the key for this is the prod.id. So we have the id, and then we're interested in the title and the image. Okay, all right, and here we will display an image tag. We will give the source as prod.image, and the alt text for this is prod.title, and what we want to do is let's uh, move this inside another section. Now, since we are returning multiple statements, right, we need to provide a curly bracket, and we will write an explicit return statement over here. So when there are single lines, right, you can make use of the arrow function syntax, and you do not need to write an explicit return statement, but in this case we will have to do that. All right. Um, so we have this section, then we're showing the image, and we were creating another section over here, right? And here we want to display the prod.title, and let's do one thing, let's display the description as well. Okay, and let's give this a class product. Actually, we don't need a class over here. Let's give this a class product item. Okay, and yeah, let's call this as product. Okay, and right now you can see we are getting the image as well as that. Let's change the size. So style. So over here we provide the style in a different way. So we want to change the height and the width, right? So we'll say height. Okay, now this works like an object. Okay, since we're providing a value, we will make use of curly braces, and then we are specifying the properties of an object. So we're creating an object over here. Let's set the height to say 200 and the width to uh, 200 as well. So you can see all of the images have become small. Suppose we want to make use of the object fit property, and we wanted to set to contain, for example. So you can see it is coming like this, right? And let's put all of these inside a let's put this over here. Okay, and let's go inside our index.css. We have the product, and we will say display grid over here, and then we will say grid template columns. So the first column will take up say 200 pixels. Actually, let's make use of this. We'll say repeat. We'll say auto fill, and we will say min max of whatever is greater 300 pixels or one fraction, pick that. Okay, so you can see they're coming side by side. This is the image, this is the title, and then this is the description. Okay, and this is the selected category. Now what we will do is we will change the category to men's clothing. Okay, and now you can see that it loaded all of the products which are inside the men's clothing. Okay, and it is showing their description and title, right? Let's make another slide change dot product item. We'll say display grid template columns. The first column will take up 200 pixels, and the next one will take min max of let's just say it takes up one fraction. Okay, so we have the image and its title followed by its description and then the next one. Okay, so you can see that as we are changing the category, the products are getting updated. Okay, let's just, for the sake of saving space, let's just comment out the description and let's just take a look at the title. All right, so this is where the use effect hook is pretty useful. We are able to respond to the category which is being selected. Once the category which is being selected that is modified, this hook gets called, and then it calls this function get products by category. Whatever is the selected category, we get all of the products. We are setting those products to the state variable, and then what we are doing is we are going through all of the products and displaying their image and their title. Okay, so this is how we are able to react to external changes because we are getting the data from an external source. When that data is available, then we are telling React that now you need to update the UI. So this is another use case where the use effect hook is widely used. All right, so I hope both of these hooks are clear to you guys, the use state hook as well as the use effect hook, and when to use it, how to use it, and what are the applications. We'll be building more, small, projects to understand, how these, how different functionalities within React work. So you can think of this as like a, clothing app where basically you are able to not a clothing app, like a products app or something. You select a category and it shows you the products in that category. All right, so I hope this is clear to you guys. We'll end the session here. In case you have any doubts, you can join the Discord um voice channel right now and I'll clear doubts over there. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I hope you are understanding React, you're having fun with it. And that's it for this session. Take care. See you. Bye.